Water is one of the vital components of life, and what we do here relates to keeping that water clean and usable, or if it's been contaminated, cleaning it up again.
Nestled atop a hill on Ada's picturesque south side is a building that's been a fixture of the community for close to 40 years, the Robert S. Kerr Environmental Research Laboratory, more commonly known as Kerr Lab. The edifice itself is very impressive. Located on 16 acres approximately 3 miles south of Ada, the lab is perched on a bluff overlooking the Red River Valley. The original building is 4 stories and provides 50,000 square feet of laboratory and office space. This part of the building houses 37 separate labs. In addition to the facility in 1993, provides another 20,000 square feet of space.
This lab originally opened in about, I think the facility construction on this facility started in 1964. There were a few people in Ada prior to that who were here for a year or so, kind of getting ready to get the work going on this facility. The biggest part of our work for a long time, and still probably somewhat more than half, is to look at problems and issues related to groundwater. We look at it in really 2 aspects. One of them is there's a lot of groundwater which has gotten contaminated by improper waste disposal practices, by leaking underground storage tanks, by accident spills and things of that sort. And so a good deal of our work looks at how do you clean that up. We also try to protect groundwater. That's a big question. How do you allow economic activity to go on over an aquifer at the same time without putting the aquifer at risk for either improper waste disposal practices, or if you have a highway running across there, like a tanker truck could tip over and spill. So we look at ways to try to, as I said, protect groundwater consistent with allowing people to conduct ordinary economic activities on the surface.
While a significant part of Kerr Lab's research focuses on groundwater, there is some work dedicated to surface water as well.
The other part of our work relates to ecosystem restoration, primarily along the banks of rivers and streams, restoring these so-called riparian areas, which are the areas adjacent to water bodies. Often one of the big issues are things like pesticides and fertilizers, which may have been running off the land, or in some cases through the soil into the river. And so these areas along the streams can act as protective buffers to prevent that from happening.
I mean, it's kind of a two sides of a coin. On one hand, some of the sites that we go to are contaminated, and so you see some of the bad things that can happen. But on the other hand, we do see or are able to provide parts of a solution to cleaning up these sites, and that can be a very rewarding aspect of working here.
Kerr Lab has an important history, one that predates the Federal Environmental Protection Agency that it now serves. An amendment to the Federal Water Pollution Control Act of 1956 led to the existence of field laboratories across the country. These labs were research facilities intended to combat the growing water pollution problems. Kerr Lab focused its earliest work on solving water pollution problems in Arkansas, Louisiana, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas.
When the lab first opened, it did focus on water in the southeastern United States. It opened before there was an EPA. The EPA came into existence in December 1970. When this lab opened, it was part of the United States Public Health Service, which was a predecessor agency, in a sense, to the EPA.
As with many instances, politics played a role in bringing the lab to Ada in the middle 1960s. The lab's formal name reveals that much.
In about 1961, there was a bill passed in the Senate that looked at a number of issues related to water, including a provision that would establish a number of water research laboratories. And Robert S. Kerr, who was a senator from Oklahoma at the time, was one of the people who played an important role in the passage of this bill. And as a result of his influence, it was determined that one of these was going to be built in Oklahoma. This is probably apocryphal, but it was said that he had told OSU and OU that it could be built one place or the other because it was supposed to be near an institution of higher education. Supposedly they couldn't agree between them. They should decide, but they couldn't agree. And so he said, well, the hell with it. I'll just put it in Ada. That's my hometown. There's a university there.
The EPA was formed in 1970, and Kerr Lab became one of the agency's 15 research laboratories across the nation. The EPA assigned new missions to the lab, including the study of environmental impacts of mining, irrigation, petroleum, animal waste, and overall water quality. Now the lab's work would have national and, in some instances, worldwide applications.
And when the EPA was formed, it was realized that if we're going to have a good environmental program, it has to be based on a sound science, it has to have a sound scientific and technical base, both for the regulations we're putting into effect and for what we're asking people to do in terms of environmental control, environmental cleanup. And so the results of the work that go on here get used really in two ways. In some ways, they get fed directly into these policies which are being developed. And the other way they get applied very directly is that we work closely with the regional offices, particularly in the area of cleaning up contaminated groundwater, where we translate the results of our research into things that they can get people to do right now. And conversely, it's a good relationship because we get feedback from them on what the really tough problems are that they're having to deal with.
In 1979, Kerr Lab was designated as EPA's Center for Groundwater Research. Accordingly, research was refocused on groundwater protection and reclamation. Major work was done on the physical, chemical, and biological processes which control the transport and transformation of contaminants in the subsurface environment. Meanwhile, on a parcel of EPA land west of Ada, lab scientists conducted related field research.
In addition to the site we're at today, which is about a 16-acre site, we have a 110-acre site out located right near Gar Corner, about 12 miles west of here. That site has been used. We've had either access to it indirectly or owned it directly for about 20 years. The activities which are going on there now are part of our ecosystem restoration program. It's a site where we can study some things on land at small scale, but we own the land, and so we can do controlled experiments out there. And then in addition, there are some special facilities out there which can be used to test the mechanical integrity of wells which are used for injection, either in petroleum production, where you would be injecting salt water back into the ground, either as for secondary recovery or simply for saltwater disposal. And then also for such wells are used for waste disposal in some parts of the country.
In 1995, the EPA's Office of Research and Development was realigned. As a result, Kerr Lab became a part of EPA's National Risk Management Research Laboratory, headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio. Kerr Lab became the Subsurface Protection and Remediation Division. At this point, the lab found itself responsible for developing and evaluating innovative methods to restore contaminated groundwater, prevention of pollution of pristine groundwater, and restoration of watershed ecosystems. In 2002, Kerr Lab was renamed the Groundwater and Ecosystems Restoration Division, with the mission staying the same.
What we do is really essential to the EPA's continued operation. I mean, we provide information that's essential to the rest of EPA to do its job. The emphasis on restoring ecosystems and taking a somewhat more holistic picture of the environment, so water more generally, is kind of the way the EPA is moving. We're involved in some programs related to sustainability. How do you allow people to have a good, healthy lifestyle, good economic climate, and still maintain a healthy environment?
Kerr Lab's research applies to groundwater and ecosystems around the globe, but it also provides important practical expertise on a regional basis.
But I think we have work going on in Oklahoma that's important to the state. And one of them is we have a large project with the city of Norman at the moment, at the present time, to look at their arsenic problem. And they're trying to take a somewhat different approach than just treating the water. If you have arsenic in your water, and arsenic is a naturally occurring mineral, and it occurs in particular parts of the subsurface environment. One way to deal with that, if you have it in your water, is to pump it to the surface, treat it, remove the arsenic, and then let people use the water. The one downside of that is you now have this arsenic waste which you have to dispose of, which may be considered a hazardous waste and quite costly. That's kind of an area where we're working on something which has a very direct application to a local problem, and in some sense could have a bearing on the Arbuckle Aquifer issue. So it's something we're doing which has got a direct bearing on what people who live here.
Although groundwater is a specialty at Kerr Lab, the lab has no direct involvement in the controversy surrounding the Arbuckle-Simpson Aquifer south of Ada.
Everywhere, including the United States, this whole issue of water supply is becoming more and more crucial, and we are not directly involved in the controversy over the Arbuckle Aquifer, but that's a good example of the fact that there is a shortage of supply. The folks west of Oklahoma City do have a need for water, but so do the folks in southeastern Oklahoma who are already using the aquifer, and there's a big political battle going on here, and that's not the only place in the country where that kind of battle is being fought. So I think the conventional wisdom, at least at this time, is that over the next 10 years, water supply and quantities of water available to people are going to become a more and more critical issue just about everywhere in the United States and around the world.
Kerr Lab has, however, conducted tests of the Ada water supply derived from the Arbuckle-Simpson Aquifer via Bird's Mill Spring.
Water is high in mineral content. It contains a lot of calcium minerals like this, which are, basically part of the human body, and they're not things which are there are things which are in fact not harmful to people at all as far as we know. It's good water. It's very high quality water. We had somebody out here several years ago who kind of looked at what's in Bird's Mill Spring water, what's in Evian, I think. Did kind of a comparison, one with the other, and Bird's Mill Spring water looked pretty good compared to, it's right up there with Evian in terms of its quality. So,
perhaps overlooked by some is the number of jobs Kerr Lab provides the Ada community. The jobs range from researcher and scientist all the way to maintenance and security. There are also contract employers on site.
we have in total about 150 employees. There are 55 federal employees, that is people who work directly for the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Then there are a number of people, probably about 80, who work for a variety of contractors. And then in addition, we have a number of part-time employees, and then we have some part-time janitorial staff. So in total, every day about 150 people are coming to work out here.
I think the sentiment of most of my colleagues here, including myself, is that this is a very rewarding place to work. I feel like we make a difference on a local, regional, and national and international scale. We moved here from Austin, Texas, and when we came here, we said we'll give it 3 years, and that was 17 years ago.
When this lab was originally built, there was a requirement that it be near an institution of higher education, which East Central is, so that was critical to locating it here in Ada. And then we have employed students here almost since the beginning. We currently have, as I said, about 20, and they fill a very essential role for us. It's a good kind of symbiotic relationship. We rely on these students to do a lot of kind of technician level work, lab assistant work, and at the same time, these students get some really valuable real-world experience about working in a laboratory. They develop skills which they would be hard-pressed to get any other way, in which very few other universities can offer their students that kind of opportunities. The jobs that are located out here, by and large, pay quite well. We're a good employer. And of our employees, about 95% live in the immediate Ada area. We, surprisingly enough, have a few people who commute from Norman and one or two who commute from Oklahoma City every day. It's better them than me, I think.
There is no doubt that Kerr Lab is a vital player in the protection of the world's environment. Scientists at the lab have performed groundbreaking studies of local, regional, national, and worldwide importance, yet most of them are glad to call Ada home.
Ada is a good place for this facility to be located, I think, and at the same time, I think this facility is good for Ada.